Okay, everybody, welcome back to our third and final session today. It's going to be on mindfulness-based cognitive therapy with Dr. Cinzia Pezzolesi. So, Dr. Pezzolesi is a chartered clinical psychologist, senior lecturer in mental health and wellbeing, and the clinical director of the Mindfulness Project in the UK. She qualified as a mindfulness teacher at the University of Bangor and as a CBT therapist at Oxford University. Her areas of expertise include anxiety, depression, eating disorders, and mental health and well-being at work. Cinzia also has a passion for mindful eating, which has led her to train as a mindful eating teacher and to develop professional training for other like-minded professionals. She is the Vice President of the Center for Mindful Eating in the USA, a space dedicated to the education of professionals and the general public around food and the interconnection between our bodies and minds. You can learn more about her work at www.cinziapezzolesi.com. So let's give Cinzia a warm welcome, and we'll just get started whenever you're ready, Cinzia. All right.
Okay. Thank you, Niall, so much. And thank you for having me and everyone for attending. I'm very excited, almost a little bit nervous. And it's great to see, let me see here. Wow, so many attendees. And Niall has already introduced me, so there isn't very much more to say, and more to say that by background I'm a clinical psychologist, but I really do have a genuine passion for mindfulness. And if I have to say that there is one thing that has changed my life more than anything else, it's definitely mindfulness. And I had experience of mindfulness first as under the form of research. So when I moved to the UK in 2006, I started to work in a university as a research assistant, and one of the first projects was on the effects of mindfulness on eating disorders. And at the time, mindfulness was not as well known as it is today. So I found it extremely fascinating, and after seeing the effects on the research we were doing, I realized that it was also very important for me to start my own practice, and there I fell in love in a way with just its simplicity, but also how simple and powerful it can be. And there have been very many occasions in my life where I thought that mindfulness really, really helped me. And probably I'll share more in a bit as we go through the presentation. And you might hear on the background my lovely kids who are having a little tantrum with my babysitter. I hope you don't mind. And before we start, probably I guess someone else has also asked you this today, like the other presenters. But I have a little poll just to check who is in the room, and it would be nice to get a sense if whether you're attending as a professional or because you're curious for your personal reasons. And I love the fact this is just so fast and in real time. I'm going to as soon as we get all the answers, I'm going to share it. And nonetheless, feel free to use the chat. I would like this session to be interactive if possible, and like perhaps a like to an MBCT session, where in any mindfulness session where doing and practicing is even more important than what is around it. Okay, so we have about 100 answers, and of which we say like the vast majority, or like more than half of the participants have either personal and professional interests or professional, and as well I can see that someone is using the chat. Perfect, thank you, Jane. So this session is titled the MBCT and Common Misconceptions, and also its use in common misconceptions. And with regard to the common misconceptions, I really would like you to share your questions and doubts, because then I put that title on, and then I realized, well, that is very subjective. Things that might be obvious to me might not be obvious to someone else. So please do use that space of the chat, the questions at the end, but also during the presentation to ask me whatever you want, whatever is not clear as well. Okay, great. Thank you for answering the poll. So what we're going to look at today, we are going to define the MBCT. What is it? What it comes from? And because MBCT was developed as an approach for people who had a history of depression and therefore were vulnerable to future episodes, we will look at depression, how it works, how a relapse works, and how we can get out of our heads. And we'll also have a practice of mindfulness, look at some evidence, and exploring together the common misconceptions. And again, if there is anything that is not here I won't cover, just feel free to ask at any time. Perhaps there is just one other thing that I want to do before just diving into the content, is to maybe to take a second just to feel our bodies for a moment. So to feel your feet on the floor if you can, with perhaps having your leg uncrossed, and try to be connecting to our bodies for a moment. Sometimes we spend a lot of time in our heads and not enough in our bodies. So maybe gently stretching your arms, bringing them all the way up to the ceiling with the palms together, pointing the ceiling. And as you stretch, try to continue breathing, not holding the breath, and also releasing. Maybe sitting slightly on the edge of the chair if you're sitting on a chair, and so you have a little bit of space for moving the shoulders, rotating the shoulders, so moving them close to your ears and then squeezing the shoulder blades together at the back, and then pulling the shoulder down and forward. So just feeling this part of the body that sometimes is quite tense if we're spending a lot of time on the computer, and changing rotation as if we are wearing our body again, remembering that we have this body. So pausing, and maybe if your neck is fine and you can move it freely, just warming up a little bit the neck. So imagine that you're drawing a number 8 with your nose. Or moving your head towards the left and right. And if you can stretch the neck by bringing both of your hands and letting them rest on the back of your head, slightly stretching the back of your neck and the spine. Softening, releasing. And as you're still sitting on towards the edge of the chair, you can rotate your back and bringing your head towards the left shoulder, and so with your head looking behind you. So you're twisting the back, remembering to breathe, exhaling and changing rotation. Exhaling, coming back to center. And we are ready to start, just maybe with a slightly enhanced awareness of the body. And that was done also in quite an informal way, because there should be no separation, or not much separation between our formal meditation practice or mindfulness practice and the informal one, as mindfulness can become like a way of living and being. So let's look at what is MBCT. And so first of all, as I was mentioning before, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy was developed as a targeted approach for people who have an history of depression and therefore are vulnerable to future episodes. So it was developed by Siegel, William, and Tisdale, and in the late 90s. And those three psychologists were really looking for a way to avoid depression relapses. So they started to look at the mechanisms that would lead to a depressive relapse. And what they found was that one of the main protective factors was the ability to decenter from our thoughts. So to disentangle from certain repetitive and ruminative patterns that were typical of depression. So the ability to decenter from our thoughts is at the core of mindfulness meditation. So what they did, they went and visited Jon Kabat-Zinn. And Jon Kabat-Zinn, you might have heard of it if you are familiar with mindfulness, was can be considered the father of mindfulness in the Western society. He started a few years back in 1979, and basically brought his own experience with mindfulness, with meditation and yoga, and his understanding of the Buddhist psychology, putting it together into a very secular 8-week course that was intended for people who wanted to learn how to deal with their emotions and mood in a more skillful way. At the beginning, the MBSR was developed for people with chronic pain, and that was part of the sorry, I got distracted reading the chat, and then and Naya suggested, do you want to keep the chat open? And I said, yes, of course, I like to do it. But then I realized that if I read the chat, I lose concentration. And so I was saying about Jon Kabat-Zinn that developed the mindfulness-based stress reduction course in 8 weeks for people with chronic pain initially as part of the behavioral medicine approach. It was developing, and therefore, so the MBCT use mindfulness as basically as a core mechanism to drive change in people who had several episodes of depression, and now also for people who are actively depressed. And so draws from mindfulness the main core skill. It actually takes from the MBSR its structure. So an MBCT program is taught in 8 weeks, meeting once a week for about 2 hours. Usually the number of people in an MBCT class is slightly smaller than in a mindfulness-based stress reduction class. And but also the mindfulness-based cognitive therapy draws from CBT, from the cognitive behavioral therapy itself. And it borrows basically two aspects. One is the understanding of depression, how depression works, and how a relapse happens, but also it does it offers it does start from the understanding also in CBT that it's very important to decenter from our thoughts. So in CBT, the centering is implicitly done because people are asked to work with their thoughts. They keep thoughts diary, and they are almost forced to see habitual thinking patterns they tend to avoid. And so in a way, they are able to relate to their thoughts in a different way. So that also is part of the MBCT. But in MBCT, this is done very much intentionally. So we learn to relate differently to our thoughts. And of course, if there is any questions or feel free to pop it into the chat. As I was mentioning before, the MBCT was developed because of the need of finding something else to offer to people who would chronically become depressed. So at least 3-4 times. And because we are talking about being depressed and relapse, I think it's also quite important in order to understand better how MBCT works to explore what it's like to be depressed. And I'm also wondered if anyone has had an experience of depression, and so that you might be able even either to chat or to answer the poll, because I think that is that is also important to understand what it feels like to be depressed. And I guess if you've been there, you probably can recognize what you see in the slide. But let's have a look at the poll first and the chat. Okay, still answering, but I can see already that we're about 70%. Have you ever experienced depression? Yes. And in some ways, we all will go at least through one episode of major depression in our life. Depression has to do with usually sense of loss, something that could be losing a person, but also status, or and it is characterized by this sense of low mood that is persistent. You can see, I can see, around 66% of the participants have had at least an episode. And if you can see here on the left, Anna's stories. I wake up to find myself exhausted. I drag my body aching for an hour, 2 hours of sleep, out of bed into the bathroom, and I'm tired. So feeling quite tired is very common when we're feeling depressed. Then I'm driving on my way to work, trying to ignore the nausea that comes from taking medications, and finding hard to eat. Then sitting at the desk, it's she's staring at the screen, and finds hard to concentrate, to get the meaning of the emails, and then when at home, I think this is quite an important one. I had 2 meetings and a conference call today, acting happy and normal, and that has exhausted me. So I think this is also quite important to underline that oftentimes even people like mental health hasn't got a specific face or look, and especially when we're feeling low, it can be extremely hard to just act as if nothing is happening, or is everything as if everything is perfectly fine. I don't know if you have that, or what is that struck you when you were depressed. Well, if you want to also write it in the chat, it would be amazing, just to see how you connect to the story, or what was the hardest thing for you to do when you were not feeling great. But and as a way to see maybe some comments in the chat, and I know that this is not one of the easiest questions I could ask. I want to emphasize that usually feeling sad is the most common symptom of being depressed, or not wanting to do things we used to like, hard to eat, or all of a sudden we are overeating, and deep sadness, low energy, motivation, not enjoying, hard to get out of bed, indeed. Being agitated, sometimes we can notice that a person is quite irritable and agitated, or sometimes people are very slow, hard to speak and to explain their thoughts. Loss of energy. So up to this point, we're talking about physical symptoms, but then there are some cognitive symptoms that are quite characteristics. So the sense of feeling worthless and the sense of guilt. So the vast majority of people I work with feel bad about feeling bad, or feel bad because they would say, I don't have anything to be sad about. Hard to concentrate, and suicidal thoughts. So thinking about suicide is not really uncommon at all. Like, most people won't go as far as planning, for example, but suicide is commonly seen as a problem-solving activity. I don't know what else to do, then I might well do that. Let me see. Observe more rather than observer mode rather than participant mode. Yes, everything seems an effort. Poor appetite, waking up, living the day ahead in my head before getting up, and not seeing the point. Yes, not seeing the point. What is the point? Loss of hope and purpose. So from a cognitive point of view, what happens is that our brain becomes very biased. So, and this is called in CBT the cognitive triad. So we have specific patterns or negative thoughts that concern the self, the world in general, and the future. With regard to the self, there is a lot of blame. As I was saying before, I shouldn't be feeling this way. There is nothing wrong in my life. I don't know why I don't get better, or a lot of self-criticism, or feeling guilty. But also, the way in which our memory works is that it becomes biased as well. So we tend to review past events, but also imagine future event in line with the mood we are experiencing. So what I've done in the past didn't go well. There is no point in looking at the future because it will not go well and it's pointless. It's like having our head in a cloud and not being able to see the edge. So, and this is typical: the self, the future, the past, and every experience. It's like we are wearing a big pair of glasses with very dark lenses. And we were saying before that depression tends to come back, and actually the vulnerability to depression increases based on the number of episodes we have had. What do I mean by a depression relapse? So a relapse is when the pattern of negative thinking, feeling sad, experiential avoidance, which I'll explain in a second, and a range of physical sensations come up again after the first episode we had. And those elements tend to work together and reinforce each other. So it almost is like wearing a hat where all of those things come together. And as I was saying, is lower mood, feeling sad, starting to ruminate around things. So ruminating means that it's simply a sort of problem-solving activity. But there is a problem with rumination, which I'll explain in the next slide in a second. Experiential avoidance is often characteristic of a person who has experienced depression before, and then also has gone through a period of depression-free life. So once I've been depressed and then I felt better, as soon as I notice that I'm a little bit sad, what happens is like, why am I feeling in this way? I hope that my depression doesn't come back. Or what is going on? What is changing? Why? So in a way, we start to focus inside and we start to think about what could potentially be done, or what would be the implication of this in the future, but also why we are feeling in a specific way. And oftentimes, experiential avoidance refers to the fact that we might not want to ever experience anything sad or low mood again. And that is very understandable, because once a person has been depressed, it's quite a painful process. However, trying not to think about something negative doesn't really work. It's like I'm telling you, don't think of a blue elephant. Of course, a blue elephant is already there in your mind. So, why once I had depression do we tend to get more episodes of depression? So the reason why is because, first of all, the threshold at which depression can be triggered lowers. Yeah. So usually what happens is there is a mild upset, so a mild sadness that will trigger the whole lot of rumination, sadness, avoidance, and so on and so forth. And so there is a sort of like minor sadness and an increased spiraling out of those feelings that feel a little bit out of control and grow and grow and grow. The second reason is because a person is subject to depression manages this low mood in a different way compared to a person who is not subject to getting depressed. And the difference is that when I start to feel sad and I'm vulnerable to depression, I would go into self-focused attention. So starting to think, what happened? Why am I feeling this way? As I was mentioning before, what might happen in the future if things don't change? Whilst the person doesn't tend to get depressed tries to manage the feeling by, for example, doing something to feel better. For example, okay, I'm a little bit upset. I'm going to have a warm bath. I'm going to watch a nice movie. I'm going to have an ice cream. And so the self-focused attention versus activating some coping behaviors will make quite a big difference in terms of developing a relapse or not. But this is all linked to the fact that this self-focused attention will trigger our ability to ruminate. As I was just mentioning, rumination is a problem-solving activity, but it has a fault. And the fault is that we are trying to think our way out of a problem, but oftentimes either the problem has happened in the past, or the problem is not here yet, or we're trying to think about an emotional problem, and we can't really think our way out of an emotion. So so if I am feeling sad and I'm trying to think about it, I will not feel better because I I can't think my way out of sadness. And oftentimes rumination moves us away from a problem rather than closer to dealing with that problem. Because whenever I feel sad, in reality, what happens if I've been sad before and I had depression before, most likely I would think, I don't want to feel sad. I just want to be happy. And that not wanting is like not thinking about the blue elephant. In truth, we can always go through emotional states. Do you guys know how long does an emotion last? No. Yes. I think Zico as Samuel, yeah. Lindsay, yes, you're getting there. So basically, between 60 and 90 seconds, and an emotion doesn't. So it would be quite impermanent if we would not reiterate it in our mind by thinking about it. Yeah. So of course we can be upset for more than like 60 seconds or 90 seconds. We can be upset forever with someone, but that is through the process of thinking. We're going to reactivate that emotional state we are trying to get rid of. Yeah. So in this way, according to the principle of MBCT, we would like to create a little bit of space between our thoughts and this tendency to ruminate, to think our way out of the problem, and as well as the experiential avoidance. So trying to push away those experiences that are quite painful versus embracing the reality for what it is. How do we get out our heads? Definitely the answer is probably not surprising, by practicing mindfulness. Exactly. And may I ask you guys, what is your experience with mindfulness? I'll have a little poll for that as well, just to get a sense of if you're new to the practice or if you're very expert, if you're teachers. Let's see. Great. Okay, so most of you have practiced mindfulness before. Fantastic. We have also some new people. Great. And about 25% as of you have a regular practice. But most of you have practiced before, not so regular. Perfect. And just for the people who have never had of mindfulness before or never practiced before, the way in which I would describe mindfulness, and of course there are many wonderful and valid definition of mindfulness. I have a Buddhist center next door, and I go there for the drop-in meditations, and every day they have a different teacher during the week, and they define mindfulness every time a person goes there before practicing. And even if I've had it a million times, I think I still grasp something different every time. So I'm also inviting you to have this sort of curious and beginner's mind if you're an experienced meditator practice. But I mean, an experienced meditator, so you have your own practice. So mindfulness is a relational skill. Is how I relate to what is going on in my mind, in my body, in this specific moment. How I relate to the world around me. So Mark Williams says is open, non-judgmental awareness, a direct knowing. So being in touch. Direct knowing means that I can either drink from this glass, and then that would be my direct knowing, or I can think about this glass. I don't like it. It doesn't look nice, and so on. and then I'm thinking. So direct knowing is like being with your experience rather than thinking and being in the realm of thinking. And thinking about what is happening with our mind and body, but also in, what is happening outside in our surroundings. And how do we practice mindfulness? We focus on an object. We often is the breath. We'll have a practice in a moment where we'll focus on a couple of things, and we'll try to train our attention to focus on these objects. And whenever we notice that the mind wanders away, we try to bring the mind back. So the mind will wander away. This is what the mind does, is what it does most of the time, really. And the gentle bringing the mind back is what we learn through the practice. So mindfulness is something in a way that also we do with our body, and it requires a little bit of ability to concentrate, which is what frustrates most of the people, is hard to focus. And the attention span, the average attention span is not very long. Do you want to give a go at that as well? What's the average attention span of a person? Yeah. Thanks for your answers. So I can see some people are very, very generous. Some others are a little bit harsher with our brains. But I think it's interesting. The very first answer was like even the I saw it was the closest to the what I had in mind. So usually between 14 and 16 seconds, the mind kind of wanders away. Even if you want to be focused on something, you will have unrelated thoughts coming. And then you kind of learn even to observe the quality of your mind. So what is happening? What are those thoughts? They tend to be quite repetitive over time. So in a way, as we are trying to steady the mind and to focus on something, we also get to know the constant stream of thoughts and emotions, and oftentimes if we're trying to sit still, it's like taking one of snowballs. You shake them a little bit, so the mind becomes louder, and then slowly, sometimes it settles. Would it be okay, guys, to work with together with the practice? And I'm conscious that maybe for the new meditators, for the people who have not practiced before, it might be a little bit overwhelming. But feel free to follow my instructions only if they feel right. Otherwise, you can do something else. You can just breathe and pause, and just trying to make this practice like safe. Even though what I would like you to do together, and I'll guide you through it. So, is to work a little bit with the awareness of our breath, which is one of the main mindfulness meditation practices, but also bringing to the practice a little difficulty at one point that we can use and work with as we meditate. So when I say a little difficulty, I mean something that it could be a little disappointment, or something that might activate us, irritate us, or make us as a sort of a resonance. However, not choosing something that is overwhelming, that will destroy us, or like will make us unable to practice because it's too intense. Yeah, so just trying to, when is the time to choose something that you are able to hold in awareness without being overwhelmed. And so if you are ready to practice, I'm inviting you to sit in a way that is comfortable, with your feet on the floor, and so your legs uncrossed. And your bum on the chair. The back could be either self-supported, or if the body doesn't particularly like that, you can have your back a little bit more relaxed. I would like this posture to be intentional in a way, but also quite comfortable, and a posture that can be sustained. If it feels right, allowing your eyes to close. Maybe just taking a couple of slightly deeper breaths. And just acknowledging for a moment that we are transitioning from listening mode, understanding, into more of a being mode. Just being open to whatever is going to arise in these experiences, and just trying to let go for a moment any sort of engagement with reasoning and thinking, but just feeling for a second your body, especially the lower part of the body. Because when the lower part of the body feels connected, grounded, the upper part can relax. So allowing your shoulders to drop if you can, the jaw to soften, as if you can create a little bit more space inside your mouth by letting the jaw drop. The face is soft. And just notice how your body knows exactly how to breathe. And it's gently taking the air from the room, allowing the oxygen to reach your body. And as you exhale, the body is able to let go a little bit. So on the inhale, it's expanding, the exhale is contracting, and there is no need at all for you to change the way in which you're breathing. Just really trying to feel the breath, not to think about the breath. Knowing that if you're able to breathe these days, this virus around is already an indication that there's more right with you than wrong with you. So just gently connecting to the quality of the breath. Perhaps it feels subtle or deep, fast or slower. And exploring where the breath is most vivid for you in the body. Where do you feel it? How do you know that you're breathing? And of course, whether you are a novice or an expert, you might have noticed by now that the mind has a life on its own. So the thoughts, sounds, the emotions, all of this will appear in the field of your mind, and you can simply acknowledge what you're noticing, and when it feels right, gently re-escorting the mind back to the breath, so that each breath is a fresh start. Each breath is a new beginning. Is a new way to refocus your attention in the moment. So you're just following the breath. This breath. And this breath. And this breath. And when the mind wanders away, as it surely will, that is not an indication that the practice is not working or you're failing in this. It's just what the mind does. So with a very gentle, kind attitude, try to escort your mind back once more to a sense of the body breathing, the chest expanding, the abdominal wall rising and falling. Maybe noticing the gentle movement of the head. And there is nothing to fix here, nothing to achieve. We are exactly where we're meant to be right now. Just here, in this moment with this breath. And this breath. And also having a sense of the whole of the body. Perhaps having a general feeling of how is the body in this moment. Perhaps it's tense or agitated or relaxed. You might notice a specific pattern of sensations, maybe in a part of your body, maybe some tension around your back or neck, or actually a general sense of well-being. Just acknowledging and exploring the sensations that are manifesting in your body, as well as the constant and regular flow of the breath that keeps us alive moment by moment. And I also would like to invite you to explore something different from what we've been practicing until now. And if you notice that your attention keeps getting pulled away to certain difficult thoughts as you're practicing or difficult emotions, instead of noticing where the mind goes and bring it back to your breath as we did before, I would like to explore a different way of responding. So if we experience a particular thought or feeling that is difficult, let that thought or feeling remain in the mind. So not escorting it away, but just noticing when the thought or emotion is present. What do you spot in your body? See if you can become aware of any sensation, physical sensation that comes with that specific thought or emotion. And if you're able to spot something, then try to direct deliberately your attention, the focus on that part of the body where that physical sensation is present. And perhaps imagine that you can breathe into it and breathe out from it on your out breath. Not to change that sensation that might be present, but just to explore it. And if you don't have naturally any thought or concern that is coming up for you right now, as mentioned at the beginning, you might even bring to mind a difficulty that is going on in your life at this moment. Maybe something that is unresolved, something that is unpleasant, and that you don't mind staying with for a bit, for a while. Maybe a misunderstanding or an argument, something that you can work with, not overwhelming. Maybe a situation where you felt angry at someone or frustrated, regretful, guilty. Or if nothing comes to mind, perhaps choose something that caused in the past, maybe unpleasantness. And if you're able to get this difficult situation in mind, perhaps notice if, like any worry or intense feeling, and allow to get your mind to tune in with that feeling or sensation. And notice any physical sensation that is manifesting in the body. And if you have noticed that the body is responding to a difficult situation or thought or emotion, then try to bring your attention there. And if you want, you can breathe in, or imagine that you can breathe in into that part of the body and bring out of it, from it. And once your attention is right there in the body, you might even consider to try and deepen that attitude of acceptance and openness to whatever sensation you're experiencing, and saying to yourself, it's here now. It's okay to be open to it. As whatever it is already there. Let me open to it. Let me roll out the red carpet to it. Or simply just saying to yourself, softening, opening on each out breath. Maybe knowing that even if I'm saying it's already here, it's okay, you're not judging the initial situation of saying that everything is fine or that you like it. But we're just trying to remain open to that situation in your body. You don't have to like the feelings, as is natural not to want to have certain negative feelings around. And once more, if you choose, you can also experiment with holding in awareness all the sensations and the feeling and the thoughts. And as you breathe out, trying to soften and letting go as best you can. And of course, if this is not available at the moment, that is also okay. And we're trying to set the intention to be able to open up to the difficulty. And so gently, when you're ready, perhaps letting your mind go back to your breath and simply focusing on the in breath and the out breath. So as you breathe in, you know that you're breathing in. As you breathe out, you know that you're breathing out. Perhaps beginning to bring this practice to a close by having a feeling of the parts of the body that are in contact with the chair, and the feeling of the space that your body takes in this room. And I'm going to ring a bell in a moment for to indicate the end of the practice. So when you're ready, gently open your eyes. And first of all, thank you for sharing this practice with me and with the rest of this big group. It would be wonderful to have a sense of what you've noticed in this practice, and really, I would like to hear even the difficulties, or so not just maybe the positive experience, but both. I just want to encourage to share whatever came up. There is no filter. You can be as wild as you want. I've noticed that my mind needs a break. Powerful and helpful is like an hypnotherapy. I've noticed heaviness in my stomach that has lessened up when I connected with the breath and feet. Thank you. One of my best experiences of mindfulness. Thank you, Caroline. And not become distracted by my attempts to get rid of it. Was Arnold too? Okay, I like that, to get rid of it. Try to find you to stay with your voice at times. Was not able to focus. That was great. Felt very tired and deeply restful. Magazine make me feel sick. Sorry, Ruth, that was very intense. When is the next session? Okay, it was long. Yeah, I cried. To sit with a negative feeling, I felt sleepy. Thank you so much for all these comments, and please feel free to continue. I just wanted to use this moment to actually go through a very important aspect of the MBCT program, which is this obviously this practice was a challenging one, and if you've never done mindfulness before, it would have been even probably a bit too challenging. But the responses to this practice really give us a sense of what we call the avoidance versus approach mode. So usually when we deal with difficulty, it's very likely to not want the experience, so not want to connect to difficult feelings. Or some people say they just fell asleep or blank out, or trying to get rid of the experience. So that is what we normally do, because we are not necessarily either are trained to be okay with our feelings, either positive or negative, but we are a little bit brainwashed with the happiness trap. So we tend to look for certain parts of the experience that are the nice one, and we tend to avoid a little bit the negative feelings. However, when we are able to switch into the approach mode, the difference is that those feelings become softer, that we are able to warm up around the situation or the problem. We are able to even consider the possibility to be able to deal with something. So as some of you has written, like that, feeling a little bit more calm, more aware. And so the truth is that it's really hard to try to avoid the negative feelings, because life is always a little bit of a mix of all of this. But what we can do is that through the practice of mindfulness, we can learn to approach our difficulties. So whenever we are able to approach our difficulties, we are able to let them come in, but also to let them go. Because if we are not able, if they arrive, because this is inevitable and it's part of life, and we try to stop them from being there, we're engaging in the fight. So we can't let them go because we're fighting against them. So how do we move from avoidance to approach? What is very, very important, and what is different and is characteristic of mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, is that we are trying not to solve the difficulty by thinking about it, by outsmarting our thoughts. But whenever we notice that there is a thought and an intense emotion, we become curious about, where do I feel it in my body? How am I feeling? So I'm feeling sad, instead of thinking, why am I feeling sad? What happened? Why this person behaved in this way towards me, and so on. We just go and stay with that sadness from a physical point of view. So how do I feel it? It feels here in my chest like a rock, and something that is quite solid and it doesn't move. And that curiosity, the focus on the body, allow us to move towards the aspect of towards acceptance. Yeah. So the usual way of dealing with problems is like we are thinking about them. When we practice, and in an MBCT course, we'll train over and over to learn to go through emotions by using our body, rather than engaging into ruminative thinking, because we can't think our way out of an emotion. We can only go through an emotion. The moment we start thinking about emotions, we engage with them, and instead of lasting like 60, 90 seconds, they will last for as long as we engage with them. Is there any comment or question around this? Or if not, I just I was gently moving actually towards saying just a few words around the research, and then leave a little bit of space for the questions as well. And Samuel, that is an excellent question. I will answer that in when we get to the misconception and doubts and so on. So just to say that there is quite a great amount of evidence around the effectiveness of MBCT for patients who are in recovery, and so patients who had 3+ episodes of depression. I also, before like this conference, like had a look at the literature, and I found a couple of interesting studies, like a meta-analysis that compare the long-term effects of MBCT with treatment as usual, which would be usually pharmacological treatment, so the use of antidepressants or CBT therapy. And it sounds like what they found is that MBCT was more effective than treatment usually in the long term. And also some studies, although MBCT was developed to prevent depressive relapse, now a lot of studies looked at the employing MBCT when people are actively depressed. And again, in the vast majority of the participants, the MBCT sustained their recovery. So they were depression-free, and also at follow-ups, they maintained the results. We also know that the effectiveness of CBT is comparable to the one of antidepressant medications. And I also want to share this one, and thank you for the questions that I can see coming, because we'll answer them as soon as we go into the question and answers. Another thing that happens when we practice mindfulness, it is that there is a reduced activity in the part of the brain that's called the me center. So this part of the brain is formed by different regions, and it's called the fault mode network. It's called also the me center because it's the part of the brain that scans at what our environment and sees something and sees this telephone and said, how does that phone relate to me? Yeah. So what can I do with it? How am I connected to this thing? Yeah. So the default mode network is particularly active when we're not engaged into a task. So when we are doing nothing. And you might remember a few years ago, there was a study that was titled "A Wandering Mind is an Unhappy Mind." And that is because the me center, this part of the brain basically, is also linked to rumination. So you see something and there is this sort of, how does this thing relate to me? And when we are particularly depressed, the me center is specifically active. And there was this study that actually compared two groups of people. Both of them had depression in the past. One went through a mindfulness training and the other one didn't. So what the researchers did, they showed these two groups a very sad movie. Yeah. So the group who had depression before, but not the mindfulness training, would activate this me center quite a lot. And so as a consequence, they related the sadness of the movie to their own experiences. Whilst the group trained in mindfulness activated their visual cortex instead. So that means they were seeing something sad, but they were not bringing that sadness in and relating the sadness to their own experience. So what mindfulness does, it basically reduces the activity of the me center of the brain. So it reduces the rumination. And using the words of John Kabat-Zinn, I would say that what is one of the key mechanisms that will help us thrive, even if we had depression in the past, or it says it's remarkable how liberating it feels to be able to see that your thoughts are just thoughts and they're not you or reality. So the simple act of recognizing your thoughts as thoughts can free you from the distorted reality they often create and allow for more clear sightedness and a greater sense of manageability in your life. So the fact that we become skilled at relating to our thoughts in a different way as just a sort of a mental chatter rather than a rock solid reality does really open to the possibility to have more responses. Because usually if we are completely entangled with our stream of thinking, we are not even behaving very freely. So in a way, we tend to repeat over and over the usual patterns. So we have some learned responses that we repeat over and over. This is what we would call automatic pilot. But the ability to recognize our stream of thinking as just that, and to be able, sometimes they use the metaphor of seeing the waterfall, from behind the water. So you see that there is this flow, but you don't have to necessarily engage with them, or you can choose whether you want it or not. And there is a very not elegant phrase that I had at a neuroscience conference, like at least 5 years ago. This very interesting person said, our brain doesn't give a crap about our happiness. And that is true. We are not hardwired to be happy. So the brain will tend to throw all sorts of things at us to protect us. But we don't have necessarily to buy into that. But instead, stepping back a little bit, we can decide what to dive into or what we can let go. Okay, I think I want now to give you a lot of space to ask questions if you have, and I know we're going to do so after a 5 minutes break, if that's okay for everyone. Thank you.
So the first question is from Baiba. She's asked, how would MBCT work with panic attacks? Thinking about how possible is it to stay with extremely scary physical sensations like dizziness or muscle spasms?
Okay, so I would say that MBCT, if I could choose, I would send that person to an MBSR course specifically, because that the mindfulness-based stress reduction works more with the physical symptoms and how to deal with fear, and with the MBCT is more, it will tackle specifically depression and rumination and so on. So, but it's a really good question. When I work with mindfulness and of course people have panic attack, the difficulty is that that even the breath is one of the things that will normally trigger a panic attack. But the truth is that if they learn to stay with the breath and connect with the physical experience of the breath, and there is what happens in a panic attack, according to the CBT model, is that there is a misinterpretation of the symptoms as something that is dangerous. So the breath, so with mindfulness, you're used to stick to the moment by moment experience. So the breath remains your breath. That does not escalate to thinking about, the breath. Last time I was breathing so fast, I had a panic attack, and then is how that escalates. With mindfulness, you're able to stick with that physical sensation and not escalate the thinking.
Okay, great answer. Next one's from Kari. Are there any apps that you'd recommend?
Yes, I like the one that is called. I'll also type it just in case with my accent people don't understand. Insight Timer, and it's been there for a while. Is one of the first apps that I've ever joined, and is a sort of a big online meditation community. And there is a part of it that is free as well, which is great. And there are 8,000 or 9,000 meditations in there. So people oftentimes tell me that they get bored, like with the same voice over and over. And if you're one of those, like, you can have years of new practices.
Wow. Insight Timer, yeah, that's what's cool. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. The next one's from Samuel. Can a treatment plan have both thought challenge and MBCT when doing CB with a patient where CBT teaches thought challenge?
Yes, that is a really, really interesting point, because when I was studying, I did my my final project on trying to integrate cognitive behavioral therapy with mindful eating, which is basically mindfulness applied to eating, and I was I had the same questions. Like, so in theory, I should challenge my thoughts, and in but with mindfulness, I don't look at the content of the thought. I just look at the process, and I learn to let them go. So basically, I think what can be combined, I feel, is that I would teach how to decenter from. It depends on the person, to be honest. So for certain people, they will connect better if you start with the classical CBT approach, where you do thoughts diary and so on and so forth. It depends on the person and whatever they're having. But then at one point, how they relate to those thoughts will have to change anyway. So in that case, you can introduce mindfulness. For some people, for example, when we're talking about generalized anxiety disorder, where people like worry about everything all day, it might be easier to start with to teach them how to relate with thoughts in a certain way. So I think and then slowly maybe you can introduce some cognitive biases, as you would normally do in CBT.
Fantastic. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, with the mindful eating, and you do a lot of work on that. Could you tell us a bit more about that side of your work, and how do you help clients get started with mindful eating? Like, what are some of the key things people can do to
eating? Maybe we'll have another session another time, because it's a very big topic. But in general, I would say mindful eating is an approach that teaches people to be more in touch with their bodies, rather than the normal tendency is to eat with our minds, right? We decide to eat this for lunch or for dinner, or we decide to eat because it's that time of the day. And so mindful eating is something that makes us more attuned to the normal self-regulating mechanisms. For example, we remember that it's a good thing to eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full, but also we work with certain specific mechanisms we have, like this satiety, or to help us decide when to start and stop eating. So it becomes way more intuitive, and it's quite interesting that you stop thinking so much about food, especially if you have maybe a difficult relationship with food. You tend to invest a lot of time in planning preparation, or trying to avoid certain foods, or like even moves you away from the bad food, good food mentality, or dieting, because those are not natural things that we are meant to be doing. Like, animals don't really diet, do they? They have no clue of the calories that there are in meals or stuff. They just follow their bodies. And I don't know, maybe in the public, if you have kids, you might have seen them when they are little, they know how to self-regulate, and then in a way they get manipulated a little bit, and then we lose that sort of touch with the 100%. Body.
Okay. The next one is from Ruth, and she's asked, how do you move from physical discomfort to acceptance?
Yeah, Ruth, that is a very good question. And the mindfulness-based stress reduction course was developed for people with chronic pain is the hardest thing. And when we are physically unwell is something that, thoughts and so on, we might even be able to avoid it because we might get distracted or something like that. But in reality, when the body is aching and is there, it is really hard. However, what we have seen when working with people with pain is that there is the pain that is unavoidable, but the suffering is the non-wanting that pain. Yeah, I don't want this pain. I'm fed up of this pain. This pain is not allowing me to live my life and so on. So is that also fight that we put up against that pain? So in a way, in mindfulness, acceptance is something that is quite active. It's not to say, oh, I'm okay with this pain in my body or I like it, but it's to say, I don't like it, but I will not fight it. I will decide that I will stop that fight. Yeah. And how do you do that? A little bit in the same way as I was explaining before in the practice. Whenever you notice that you're reacting to the pain, you go to where do I feel it, and where do I feel it in the body, where so that curiosity towards the experience already puts you in the approach mode. And when you are approaching something, you can even let it go. If you're avoiding it, what you resist persists.
Okay, very interesting. Charles has asked, how do you work with clients who are resistant to the idea of mindfulness? Have you ever experienced that in your work?
Yes. So I do a lot of corporate work where I get thrown into an office space where people don't want even to be there. In that case, we do start with evidence, science. A lot of for skeptical people who just need to see the science, and usually whenever I do the first practice, and people might say, "Oh, I don't like these," and so on and so forth. That is a good example of how people react to an experience, and so it can be modeled in that way. So I'm asking you to focus on the breath, and then the mind will put thoughts in there, and then you go into memories and so on. So how we move away from the present moment and how reactive we are. So it's a good way of saying, look, I've tried with this with you. That shows that you can't stay with this experience. You actually have gone miles away, or you have had such a strong reaction to it. So what I'll teach you is to stay with this moment and to get access to more responses, to be more flexible behaviors. So I usually say that. But if someone is really resistant and they agree to try, you can you can. There are two approaches to say. One is quite you don't have to like it, you just have to do it and see what happens when you do it. And that would be, Kabat-Zinn would say that you don't have to like it, you just have to do it. Just sit on that cushion. But I also think that if you think about the origins of mindfulness and the philosophy behind, you can't really impose mindfulness onto people. It has to be a choice. Even in groups, we have people who just come and never practice they just come to the sessions, and then but maybe in 2 years' time, they go back and start practicing because you have planted the seed.
For sure. We've got one here from Fatima. How are MBCT sessions structured, and how is therapy spaced out through the sessions?
And so in the 8 sessions, there is so in a way, the sessions are the content of the sessions is structured. So you don't really do any one-to-one therapy, but so you start from, for example, session 1 where you have awareness. Let me just I was just going through this so there is in the first session, for example, you go through the concept of automatic pilot, and in the second session you start talking about dealing with barriers. And let's say in both the MBCT but also the MBSR, at the beginning you kind of teach the main mindfulness practices, and so you start by letting them practice meditation, but slowly you introduce psychoeducational elements that in the MBCT they have to do with exploring the territory of depression, what it's like, and how people relapse. And you go into explaining rumination, experiential avoidance, as I did basically in this session. And then you start very early teaching them thoughts are just thoughts, they are not facts. And so there's ability to decenter from the experience.
Okay, very cool. We've got one here from Roy. I think you said earlier that we can't think our way out of an emotion. Can you speak a bit more about this, please?
Yes, of course. What I meant is that that if I start thinking about I don't want to be sad, I I don't like being sad, and why am I feeling sad, and so on. We can't problem solve. So usually we think because we want to problem solve that emotion, but I can't problem solve being sad as such by thinking about it. The mindful way would be to, so first of all, if I ruminate about something and I say, like, for example, I don't want to be sad, the sort of quality, I don't like being sad, there is a quality of judgment there that instead of making me go closer to the difficulty, it makes me go farther away from it, because I won't be able to, there is sadness, which is already hard, and then there is the non-wanting, so it's an extra layer. And so I'm not getting any closer to feeling better, but I'm adding the personal fight against what is. So usually the easier way to stop relaxing is to accept what is and what is happening, to start relaxing. And so you go through an emotion by exploring that emotion. And in mindfulness, you do it by feeling what is happening in the body when you have that emotion. So how the sadness manifests. So instead of starting to think, oh, what have I done wrong? Why this is happening to me? I don't want to feel in this way. You go like, where do I feel this sadness? Okay, I feel it in my stomach. What does it look like? Does it change over time? Does it remain the same? This is how you go through an emotion. If you think about the emotion, you only reiterate that sort of process that has created the emotion in the first place.
That's a great answer. Okay. So, Cinzia, just before you go, we've had a couple of questions about follow-on resources. Like, are there any books or any websites you'd recommend people to check out after this presentation?
Yes. I think also they were sent, The Mindful Way Through Depression is, this is the old version, but there is also a newer version, which is in the cover is white, and this is a very nice step-by-step guide to MBCT. More for just first approach, there is another book that I quite like. It's called Wherever You Go, There You Are by Jon Kabat-Zinn, and it's about practicing mindfulness like more informally. Mindfulness in a Frantic World is also quite relevant, I think.
Awesome. Okay, well, Cinzia, thank you very much for a fantastic presentation. It's been brilliant to have you with us. Everybody else, thanks for joining us today. Thanks for supporting the Weekend University. It's our third year anniversary today, so it's hard to believe it's been 3 years. And I hope you all have a great Christmas and New Year, and see you all soon. All right.